I used to live in a house that felt alive in all the wrong ways. It wasn't the creaks or groans of old wood settling in the night, nor the whispers of the wind through drafty windows. No, what haunted me were the bugs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They showed up out of nowhere, like some twisted magic trick that only left me with disgust and dread. I had never liked bugs, not since I was a child. Something about the way they moved, so alien and unpredictable, sent shivers down my spine. The worst part was that these weren't your ordinary house pests. They weren't just ants or flies or even spiders. They were strange, too strange. I would find them in the oddest places. Underneath my pillow, crawling up the side of my bathtub, or skittering across the kitchen counter in broad daylight. The insects were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Some of them were a little too big, their legs twitching unnaturally as they crawled. Others had bizarre colors and patterns that I couldn't place. Some looked like they had too many legs, while others seemed to pulse, their bodies swelling and deflating as though they were breathing. It was as if nature had made a mistake, and these bugs were its failed experiments, hiding away in my house. The worst part? They were impossible to kill. Oh, you could crush them, sure, but it was disgusting. They didn't just squash like a normal bug. Their bodies seemed to explode, releasing this foul, acrid-smelling goo that was thick and sticky. It took forever to clean up, and every time I killed one, I swore it felt like a million more would take its place. No matter what I did, pest control, traps, poisons, nothing worked. Every time I thought I was rid of them, they'd come back, stronger, like they were taunting me. I became obsessed. I tried everything, sealing every crack and crevice in the house, covering drains, even sleeping with the lights on, hoping the brightness would keep them at bay. But they always found a way in, and they always seemed to be there, lurking just out of sight until I wasn't looking. And then, one night, I snapped. It had been a long day at work, the kind that drains the life out of you, and all I wanted to do was collapse in bed and sleep. But when I walked into my room, I saw one of the bugs, a big one, just sitting there on my pillow, staring at me with those awful black eyes. I had no idea how it had gotten there, but it felt like the last straw. Something inside me broke. I screamed, loud and angry, grabbing a shoe and smashing it over and over until nothing was left but a smear of guts and shattered shell. I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. That's when I heard it. At first it was faint, like a distant whisper of rain on a roof. But as I stood there, trying to calm myself, it grew louder. It was the unmistakable sound of something crawling. No, lots of somethings crawling. A wave of panic washed over me, and I froze, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. It sounded like hundreds of tiny legs skittering over each other, coming from below me, from the basement. I didn't want to go down there, The very thought made my skin crawl, but the noise was growing louder, and I knew if I didn't do something, it would drive me mad. I had to know what was making that sound. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way to the basement door, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached for the handle, my hand trembled. I could hear the sound more clearly now, a constant chittering, like a swarm of something terrible just beyond the door. I swallowed hard, every instinct in me screaming to turn back, to forget about it, to leave the house altogether. But I had to know. I had to get rid of them once and for all. With a deep breath, I twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The noise stopped instantly. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the sound. My heart was racing as I shined the flashlight down the stairs. Nothing. Just an empty basement, the same as it always was. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, trying to convince myself that it had just been my imagination, that maybe I was hearing the house settle or the wind outside. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I spun the flashlight toward it, my breath catching in my throat. There, at the far corner of the basement, where the light barely reached, something was shifting. At first, I thought it was just a shadow cast by the dim light, but then I saw it. Hundreds, maybe thousands of bugs. They covered the walls, the ceiling, the floor, writhing over each other, a mass of legs and bodies, their shapes blending into one another until they were one moving, pulsating creature. But that wasn't the worst of it. Perched in the center of the mass, looming above them, was something that made my blood run cold. It was the size of a man, easily 6 feet tall, but it wasn't human. It was some kind of grotesque spider, its bloated body covered in thick black hairs, its eyes gleaming like dark marbles in the beam of my flashlight. Its legs, far too long and thin, were planted on top of the pile of insects beneath it, like it was their ruler, their master. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I felt it, something sticky against my arm. I looked down in horror to see that I had walked straight into a web so thin and so wide that it covered the entire basement. Every movement I made caused the web to tremble, and I knew it. I could feel the spider watching me, its eyes locked on mine. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My legs were shaking as the thing began to inch closer, one slow, deliberate step at a time. I tried to pull away, but the web was too strong, too sticky. Every movement only made it worse, made the spider come closer. It was less than a few feet away now, its legs twitching, its body swaying as if it was preparing to strike. I couldn't die here. Not like this. Desperate, I spotted something. A pole, maybe a broom or a piece of an old chair, lying on the ground, just a few feet away. With all my strength, I lunged for it, my hand grabbing onto the cold metal as I swung wildly. I didn't even look, just closed my eyes and prayed I would hit it. There was a sickening thud, and for a moment, everything went quiet. I opened my eyes slowly, my hands still trembling. The spider was gone. I scanned the room, my heart still pounding, but I couldn't see it. Had I killed it? I dared to hope for a second that maybe, somehow, I had gotten lucky. But then I heard it, a soft, skittering sound above me. I looked up just in time to see it. The spider had jumped, launching itself across the room in one terrifyingly fast motion. It was on the ceiling now, crawling toward me with an unnatural speed. I barely had time to react before it dropped down, landing just inches from where I stood. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted up the basement stairs, my feet barely touching the steps as I scrambled for the door. I could hear it behind me, its legs tapping against the walls, the floor, as it gave chase. My hands reached the doorknob, and I slammed the door shut just as the spider lunged at it. I stood there, gasping for breath, my body shaking with fear. For a long moment, there was silence. I waited, my ear pressed against the door, listening. But there was nothing. No skittering, no tapping, no sound at all. I called the police. I had to. I didn't know what else to do. When they arrived, I told them everything. Every disgusting detail about the bugs, the web, and the massive spider that had tried to take me out. They didn't believe me, of course. They thought it was some kind of prank or that I was having a breakdown. They went down to the basement, but they didn't find anything. No bugs, no web, no spider. It was like it had never been there at all. I didn't stay in that house after that. I couldn't. I packed up what I could and moved in with a family member, thankful to be free of that nightmare. But the thing that haunts me the most isn't the memory of the bugs or even the spider. It's the fact that I tried to look it up. I wanted to know what kind of spider it was, whether it was some rare species or something new. But I couldn't find anything. No matter how hard I searched, no matter what terms I used, there was no match. That's when I realized something terrifying. Maybe what I saw wasn't just a bug. Maybe it was something else. Something that wasn't meant to be found. Something that didn't belong in this world. And in the dark corners of my mind, I know that it's still out there, still waiting. Hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll see you in the next one. See you on the flip side.